welcome back to the second session on using BlobToolKit. So last time we had a demo of the viewer, which is already existing on a website, and I sort of walked you through how to use it for some specific cases. And this time what we're going to use is we're going to use the BlobTools command line to create and view some of these. So if you wanted to set up your own instance, you wanted to have your own blobder visualized, or you wanted to create your own blobder from your own assemblies and read files, how would you do it? A quick story, which I actually didn't tell you last time, but I had thought I would, and then I got too excited and I didn't tell the story. This actually, the impetus for creating BlobToolKit came about because about 5 years ago, we had, I don't know if some of you heard about the Tardig Gate controversy. So there was a group in the US at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that had this big media splash. You know, the Atlantic covered it, the Washington Post covered it, National Geographic covered it. Everybody covered their article on how they had sequenced the tardigrade genome, and it had 17% horizontal gene transfer, which was a record for animals at the time. And, you know, most things had 2 or 3% horizontal gene transfer. And we had worked on the same genome in our lab in Edinburgh, and using BlobToolKit, we had identified that there were contaminants and all, and we're like, I'm sure we checked for contaminants. Did they check for contaminants? So we actually got their data, stuck it into our version of blob plots at the time, blob tools at the time. And we were able to clearly see that they had separate entities, which were bacterial contaminants, which were not at all integrated with the rest of the genome and not at the same coverage as the rest of the genome. So that's how we knew that there was a problem with their data. And, you know, then there was the Tardig Gate part was because it happened on Twitter. And then I think Ed Yong at the Atlantic wrote an article about how, you know, rival scientists do this and that. And we kept saying, we're not rival scientists. We're just trying to set the record straight because we've worked with this data. Honest mistake can happen. But that's when we realized that there was a need for possibly running this on all eukaryotic genome assemblies that are out there and make it easier for people to use. So the previous tools, if you had to use them, they would take time. This one also takes time because you have to do all the mapping and blast and stuff. But the actual creating the blobder is very quick, and in visualizing it and interacting with it is quick. And that's what we're going to do today. So that's my little intro. So I'm going to stick in the chat tutorial link, and then I will post it on Slack as well. The reason I hadn't posted it on Slack till now because I was still working on it. There you go. So if you go to that link in chat, and just give me a thumbs up after you've done that. I'll keep pausing because today is much more interactive. Every time I ask you to do something, if you've done it, just do a thumbs up. Thank you. And I will share my screen and go to the same. So share screen, there we go. Okay, so I'm on the tutorial, and Alice, can I just ask you to keep an eye and see if people are doing thumbs upping and tell me to wait? Yeah. People seem, thanks. Okay, so there's the first tutorial is today's on that link. I hope, oh, I don't think you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. And when I go in there, the first thing is, I'm making it bigger. There are 3 key concepts that I want you to take away from today's thing. So we're going to create a blobder. That's a directory on a server or on your laptop, which has all the files that are pre-processed and are ready to be loaded and visualized in the viewer. So the viewer is what I showed you last time. The viewer is a web application. The one that I showed you last time runs on a public server, but you can run the viewer on your own desktop or laptop, which is what I'm going to show you today. And basically for each assembly, you create a directory, and we call it a blobder. So a blobder can be loaded and visualized in the viewer. The BlobTools command, which I'm going to show you today, creates that blobder from lots of intermediate files. So the intermediate files are blast results, read mapping files to get the coverage information, busco, and actually we're planning to add more things in the future. So those are your intermediate files, and the BlobTools command creates the blobder. And the last part is, well, it's not the last part, but in my listing of the concept, so going to a step back actually, is a snake-make pipeline. So if you've used snake-make, it's a way of automating lots and lots of steps and making sure that you don't run the same steps again if you don't need to. So snake-make pipelines, and I will show you how to run that as well today, because that will run all the intermediate steps. It will run all the BLAST commands. It'll run all the minimap commands for mapping. It'll run busco. It'll run everything for you. And that will create intermediate files and the final blob dir. So that's what we're going to do. So, and I have a little visual. Here we go. Is that still visible? Cool. So a blob dir is viewed in the viewer. So a blob dir is a collection of files, and it's loaded up into a viewer. Now, a viewer in our case, the viewer is a web browser. But to get to the web browser, you have to run a command which will create something that the web browser can access. So that's how the viewer works. BlobTools takes all these intermediate files, which is mapping files, busco files, BLAST files. We've even got things for tRNA scan and so on and so forth. And it'll take all of that, aggregate it all together, and turn it into this blob dir, which can be viewed. And the snake-make pipeline, I'm just repeating myself, but giving you a visual, runs all the intermediate steps. And all you need for the snake-make pipeline is the assembly faster file, so the main genome assembly faster file, and any read files that you want to generate the coverage. Everything else, snake-make creates these intermediate files, which then BlobTools 2 can turn into a blob dir, which can then be viewed. snake-make actually can do this step also. So I'm just going to show, the way I've set it up is we'll first do this part, then we'll do this part, and then we'll run the whole pipeline. Obviously, I've run some of the steps already, but I will show you how it runs. Okay, is that okay? So far, so good? Thumbs up, down-ish. There was a way to have people say green and red, but thumbs up is good. That's fine. Thanks. If it's down, just unmute yourself and tell me if you need anything. Oh yeah, thanks, Nicola. You found the yes. Very good. Great. Okay. So back here. So we're first gonna install all the BlobToolKit dependencies. So this section is identical to if you go to the GitHub pipeline, that's what you have over there. And I am going to run all these commands in a new browser window where I already have Conda installed. So I will just keep this on the right, and I will keep a new, oops. There we go. And make that a bit bigger. So this is on my laptop. It's a MacBook Pro. Yes, it has RAM, but you don't actually need more than 4 or 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, and obviously you need to have space to store everything. But just to run the viewer and download the viewer and view it, you don't need anything else. So let's do all these steps. So first you need to install everything. So I'm just going to copy all of this and stick it here. And what it'll do is it'll create a home directory BlobToolKit. And this can be a Linux or a Mac. It doesn't matter. Both should work. And I'm just going to paste it, and it'll just get all the BlobToolKit components. Press enter before the last one, and now it's got all of them. So I'm just going to press LS, and you can see all 4 things. Actually, I've also got a tutorials folder in there, but that's fine. I had already got that. And so these 4 have been downloaded, and we're ready to go. So now you need all the pipeline dependencies. Is that okay with everybody? Cool. So this is the tricky part. So make sure that this works before you do anything else, because otherwise the remaining steps won't work. So it's something called Mamba, which you can install if you have Conda. And Mamba is like a super fast Conda. I mean, I guess they were being funny with the snake analogies. So I'm going to install that. Mine probably is already installed. So I press that. Mine will probably say you already have it. And this is actually just as an aside. Yeah, mine says all requested packages already installed. Notice how long it took to get the package metadata. Mamba does that bit very, very quickly, which you will see in the next step. So basically, if you've used Conda before, you use something called Conda create, and you create an environment and it loads all the things it needs. Mamba is used as a replacement for Conda, and it does exactly the same thing with the same syntax, but it's much, much quicker. So I'm going to copy and paste this command, and then you should do the same thing, and it'll take a while to install. So copy and paste, press enter. It's also prettier to look at. So has everybody pressed enter? Because this will take a while, so I can chat with you at that time. Yep, cool, Sam. Anybody else having trouble getting past to this step? We have time. We can wait for a bit.
I am now just watching. I don't know who else is.
Okay, that's fine. Was it because your Mamba didn't work?
No, my internet is very, very slow. So
Oh,
I'm
right,
having
that-
trouble opening the tutorial. So it's better that I watch.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody else having trouble getting to this step if your internet is okay?
I see another yes. I don't see any no's.
I should have asked a more specific yes or no question. Is everybody else okay till this step? I mean, I know it'll take long, but are you okay with this step? I've got a yes from Aurelian. I'd seen yeses from Nicola and Sam before, and Juliana. Thank you. Great. And anybody else who's watching along, that's fine too.
I'm
So let's
still
put-
doing the conda install step.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah.
Right. And this is, I'll
It
wait.
just took some time, but it's working fine.
Yeah, this is exactly what I noticed as well, that conda install is very, very slow. And this is why I was so happy when I discovered Mamba. It's just, mine is a lot faster because I already had done this once before. So it had everything cached. But I think you will also find if you're running it and you're running through all the downloads, that it's much quicker than conda for the same thing. Feng, let me know if it gets to the next stage, because it would be nice to have everybody on the same page, and we can chat meanwhile about all the different dependencies and anything. Juliana, did yours finish or is it still running?
So this step we have done already with conda. Do you recall?
Yes, but you might need, I mean, it might be nice to copy and paste this particular command with Mamba. I'm trying to think if anything has changed.
I was able to create the blob there.
Then you're fine.
my-
If you already have a
yeah.
blob there. Yeah.
Yes, I only found a problem with this step about the SAMS tool
Well, and that's
and
my point.
minimap. Yeah.
So it's possible that because in the previous version, I hadn't specified Moz depth, and that worked. So it might actually be good for you to run this command if you can.
Yes, right now the server's in trouble, so I can't run. That's why
Cool.
I'm just watching.
Cool. That's fine. That's absolutely
But
fine.
I mean, definitely, I will give this a try for sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
And no, this is a good point, because even if you have a working BlobToolKit environment, it might not work with all the steps of the pipeline, of the new pipeline, because of some small changes we've made in the last 2 weeks, 1 week. So I know all of this works as of today because I've tested it several times. That's why I was saying do it if you're following along, but that's fine.
Okay, so I will definitely do this tomorrow.
Sure. No,
As soon as the
there's no
server
pressure.
gets normal again, I will do everything again with Mamba.
No pressure.
Yes, thank you for letting me know.
Cool. Okay. Has mine finished quite early? If whoever was following along, has it finished? If it hasn't finished, just say no. Oh, yes is good. Yes is good. Nicola, I don't know if yours finished, if you were following. Oh, Luis.
I'm just watching.
Oh, you're watching. I'm sorry, I forgot. And Luis, is it just scrolling by screen after screen?
Sorry, it's still loading Mamba.
Oh my, wow. Okay. That's just conda being difficult then. Right, you might have to just watch in that case. Oh, Aurelian, what's no? Can I just ask?
Hey, yes, it's I had the same problem actually. The loading Mamba was very long, so I just starting with the Mamba create command line. No. Yeah.
But you've started it now.
Yeah, but it's running now. Yeah.
It's running now. I mean, you could just let it run in the background and watch, and then do the other steps yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, we'll be waiting for, I think, too long. Okay. So once you've got, and if anybody has any questions about conda or Mamba, feel free to ask those also at any point, because I realize this might be new for some of you. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on conda, but I can tell you the basics of what it's trying to do. The nice thing is that it runs on servers. It doesn't require root privileges. It creates a contained directory environment and makes all the paths relative to that directory. And therefore, it's just a nice way of packaging everything up. The problem is that sometimes creating all of this, like I looked at this was about 2 gigabytes on my laptop to download all of these things, maybe a bit more. And some servers don't give you that much space. So then you have to do sneaky things like put it in a scratch space and use that. And I'm happy to walk people through all of that separately, maybe not today. Right. So once you've created the environment, which has all these packages that are needed, then you need to activate it. So I'm going to say conda activate, copy and paste it. That actually takes about 4 or 5 seconds because it's a big environment and it needs to make sure everything is there. There we go. So when it's activated, it says BTKN. So you know that you've got all the right things. Now you need a few more things. Additional viewer dependencies. If these are not installable on your local compute environment, example, a shared cluster, you might have to run these separately. So if you're running it on a cluster and you're not allowed to install Firefox, you might have to do these steps on your laptop. But for now, let's go ahead with these steps at least. I don't need it because on a Mac, you don't need Firefox or XVFP. It works even without that. But so I'm going to copy all of these. Oh, I'm going to copy all of these commands. So what it's doing is it's activating the environment, which we have already done. It installs a few more things. It installs an extra pip package. And then it goes into the viewer and it runs Node Package Manager because the viewer is a Node JavaScript application. So copy all 5, paste it, and press enter. Again, while it's doing its thing, feel free to unmute and interrupt me for anything that doesn't make sense. It might be nice if you're running it for the first time on your own to copy 1 line at a time and press enter, because I mean, I know that all of these steps work, so that's fine. But if on your system something is weird and you press enter, you don't know which one it's stuck on, although the messages might tell you. It's just, yeah, you might want to do it 1 line at a time rather than copying all 5 lines at a time. Yeah, this always looks scary and there are warnings and things, but it just all works.
The npm install step failed for me.
Oh dear. Can you tell me what it says, or do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
This is on Linux, Ubuntu. Where is it? Here we go.
Okay.
So
Error, cannot create a string. Oh wow. Okay. npm install node.js. I'm sorry. Successfully installed this. npm install. That's very interesting. Okay, good. We
Well,
found the problem.
well, I'll poke around and see if I can figure
no,
out what
but
this all means.
yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, Li Jing has put in a question: should the -n base be -n BTK? Yep, it's yeah. In the Mamba command, I'm saying put it in the -n BTK environment. Thanks. I'll share my screen again. But yeah, feel free if anybody else has any. Thanks for video clip, share sound. There we go. Okay, back to. So mine is done. Is anybody else's still running? And Sam, obviously yours failed, but Aurelian's no?
Still running for me.
Which one? The first one or the second one?
The npm install.
Oh, good. Okay, you're almost there. We'll give it a few seconds. I think it'll be fine. And oops, wrong. I made the wrong one bigger. Can everybody see the screen? Do I need to make the text larger? readable mostly? Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. That's why. There we go. Any other questions up to this point? I won't run the commands, but I'll talk you through what's happening while we're waiting for the npm install to finish for whoever is still running it. So the next stage, we've already installed everything. Now the next stage is making sure that the commands like blobtools2 and blobtoolsview and blobtoolshost are all available. So we need to put it in our path variable. So just copy this whole line and run it, and that'll put everything in the path variable, which is here. Which means now if I type blobtools and I autocomplete, it knows where to find it because it's looking in BlobToolKit, blobtools2, and that's how it's finding it. So if I press blobtools2, it works. And I will just make the screen a bit. Yeah, there we go. So it just, I mean, I'm just showing you that it works. And now we're going to create a new directory. Aurelian, is it okay if I go ahead and then you just copy and paste the commands and follow along later?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And same for anybody else. If you're waiting for things to finish running, just, you just have to copy and paste the commands, but you can follow along with what I'm saying as I'm doing it. So we're making one more directory, and we're actually going to download a few blobders that are already created. I stuck them on my Edinburgh server, even though I now work at the Sanger because it's just much quicker to use the Edinburgh server. That's another story. So I'm going to make this directory. I'm going to go into it. And now I'm in BlobToolKit blobders, and I'm going to curl this directory. Curl is a command for getting a file, and then I'm unzipping it on the fly. So that's what that command does. So right now, if I press ls, there's nothing in that folder. If I run this command, it's quite quick. If I now show you what's in there, there's a directory called cadcxm, blah, blah, blah. That's a horrible name. But if I show you what's inside that, you see that there's a whole bunch of files. And these JSON files and I don't know what other files there are. Just check. It's mostly JSON files. Yeah, these JSON files are what are used by the BlobToolKit viewer to show you all the data, and it's all split up. If you remember last time, we had things called blast, best, sum, dist, and so on and so forth. So for each of those filters, for each of those characteristics, for each of those axes, we have a separate file. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this new version is because Rich has added lots of cool new features, which I'm just going to show you. Okay, so we've come to this part, and now we run the blobtoolsview command. And you should use it with the remote option. I'm not sure why, because I tried running it without remote, even though I'm running it on my laptop, so it's not remote, and it didn't work. But with the remote option, it did work. So what you're basically saying is create a server on this laptop, which is going to serve all the blobders that are present in this folder. Right now, there's only one blobder, but it'll show you that blobder. So when I press this command and I run it, it says initializing viewer. This 2 out of 15 seconds here, it's just waiting. It's not actually, it's done what it needs to do. It's just waiting to make sure that everything has come up. And after 15 seconds, it checks again to make sure it's come up and then gives you a message. In case you're wondering why it always takes precisely 15 seconds. Okay, so at this point, it says view data sets at this location, or for remote access, do this. So I'm first going to show you how it looks on my computer because I've run this locally, as in I've not run it on a server. So I copy that location, localhost 8001, and I stick it in the browser. So I go here, open a new tab, press enter. And voila, we have the BlobToolKit, and it's coming from localhost, which means it's on my machine. It's created a new port called 8001. And other than that, it looks exactly like what it would have looked like on the server. If you're trying to think why is it not showing the bar on the left, that's because the filters is off by default. You need to put them on. I'm going to make this full screen. And that's what we had last time. Has anybody else gotten to this point? You may not have. Anybody who's running the steps? I'm guessing not. Okay. Oh, woohoo! Well, you've gotten to that point before, Juliana. So that's good. Did you do it with the new BlobDir or with the old one?
The old one.
Old one, okay. Because this one actually has some new features, which I wanted to show you very quickly. So while we're waiting for other people's things to finish, Aurelian's and Feng's and maybe Luis's.
Yeah, but I am running a cluster, so.
Oh, right, okay. So but has it finished running?
Yeah.
Good. I'll quickly show you how to, actually, then why don't I just show you how to do the cluster steps as well? So I am going to run exactly the same steps on a cluster. So I will go to the tutorial, which is here, and I will run these 3 steps again on the cluster, on my cluster account. So that is here, make dir, download, it's downloaded. I actually had 2 others downloaded as well, but I'll just show you. And when I run this command on the cluster, it'll give a similar message. I had already set up the BlobToolKit environment on the cluster. I was just going to show you that, even on a laptop, it does work. So we wait 15 seconds. Great. And this time, notice that it says you can either view data sets locally, but I can't do that because I'm remote. I don't have access to a browser on this machine. So I need to run this command. So this command is a command that I need to run in a separate window. So if you look at the tutorial, it says, if you're running BlobTools view on a server, you should leave that command running in a terminal. So I'm going to leave this command running over here. Open a new terminal and connect using the SSH command provided. So I open a new terminal and I put in that command, SSH -L, port 8001 should forward to that. And instead of username at remote host, I'm going to put in what I need to connect to that server. So I put in Ubuntu at ghubsdev. I've forgotten what it is. ghubsdev test2. What a great name. ghubsdev test2. And at this point, it might ask you for a password or a key or something, however you normally do SSH, you put that you replace your SSH command over here. For people who are using PuTTY, it's complicated, but Juliana and I figured it out. So I'm happy to walk you through it if you're using PuTTY on a Windows machine. So when I run this command, it'll basically, it'll forward, what it's done is it's forwarded my local port 8001 over there. And now when I load up, oh, it didn't work, hang on. Yes, it did work. It did work. Sorry. I'm a bit confused because there's too many windows open. I'm just going to close this one. So it ran the command and it gave me an SSH prompt. But in the background, what it has done is it has also set up this port 8001. So again, I need to go to this URL again on my local computer in a browser and put it in. And you will see it'll look the same probably. No, it doesn't look the same. It looks different because on my remote computer, if you remember, I had 3 BlobDirs, and on the local one, I had only 1. Did that work for you, Luis?
Give me 1 minute.
No problem. Take your time.
Yes.
Woohoo! Do you want to share your screen just to prove that it works to people?
Yes, but I don't know how to share my screen from Zoom.
Don't worry about it. That's fine. As long as it's working. And are you, so you should see only 1 thing on the, you won't see 3. Is that right?
No, I see only 1.
Yeah, you should see only 1. I'm seeing 3 because I had 3 directories over there. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean,
Wonderful.
Sir, I don't know how to share.
Don't worry about it. Aurelian, wonderful.
Yeah, but it works. Perfect.
Excellent. I'm so glad. Live demos are always stressful. So here's a cool thing. So the other 2 BlobDirs are old BlobDirs. So they were made last year sometime and I just reused them. This one I made this morning and it has a few new features. So I just want to show you what they are. So when I click on that, it looks the same as last time. Yes. it's got one very cool new feature. So first of all, it's got a few extra things. It's got busco genes now. So busco genes is the idea that on each contig or on each chromosome, it doesn't blast the whole chromosome in chunks of 10. It only blasts the busco genes, because the idea is that that's a much quicker blast. And if you didn't want to do the blast n against all of NT, you could do just the busco genes. And that would still give you useful information, because the busco genes should have a match in the public databases. And so if I activate that by saying busco genes phylum, and I say category, click on the category, you get no hits, arthropodas, and proteobacterias. And we can do all the same steps as last time, where we can say only check the proteobacteria. So I click on that, I invert the selection, and I get 2 proteobacteria contigs, and I can go in there and see what they are by going to table, clicking on proteobacteria. Oops, have I broken something? I think I've broken something. Oh, that's embarrassing. Right, we can't do that. Sorry, I don't know what I've done. Maybe it's opened a separate, no. Okay, we can't do that. Sorry, the main browser works, but the little pop-up is not working. I'm really not sure why. I will check that. Sorry, my bad. The other cool thing that you can do is, so go back to, I'm going to reset this filter over here. So go back, say reset, go back to the blob view, see everything in blob view. There's a new settings type of blob. So if you go to settings, along with shape, there is a new one. So there was square, hexagon, round, and now there's plot connected windows. And what that does is, if you click on it, it looks very weird to begin with, but what it's doing is it's breaking up each contig into 10 parts, or each chromosome into 10 parts, and it's plotting each of the parts separately. And the idea is that if one of those parts is very different, then maybe there's something wrong with that part, because it's an example of horizontal gene transfer or something. So an example would be if I just select one contig over here, and I go into selection filters, it only shows me that contig. And the point is, there's something weird about this, because all the 8 parts of that contig are down over here for GCN coverage, and parts 9 and 10 have a much higher coverage, but the same GC. So maybe something is weird is going on in that contig, and obviously you can't look at each one, but something might jump out at you for some of them. This is not a mollusk. This is a insect. I think it's a butterfly, Maniola. I'm not sure. We can check, but I can do that later. And the idea is that there are these there's a new visualization, and we're always making new visualizations. Rich is very, very clever at thinking of new things. And we haven't yet figured out how best to use this. I will come up with good examples, but that's the idea. Does anybody have
I have a quick question about it. So it just breaks it automatically into 10 pieces. That's just
if it's longer than 1 megabase, then each part is 10 pieces. If it's shorter than 1 megabase, it'll break it up into chunks of 100 KB.
Okay.
So you'll get a maximum of 10 pieces.
Yeah.
And if it's shorter than 100 KB, it'll only give you 1. So if you remember, one of the proteobacteria, there was only 1 small contig, if I go back to that. So I remove the selection. I go back to the proteobacteria over here. Oops. And yeah, this one has a 2 and this one has 1. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't. Yeah.
So having separate blast results for the different circles is because that's the way it was blasted in the pipeline.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Good. Thank you. And this is specifically, this is the busco gene blast that I'm showing you.
Okay. So this right now,
right now I'm showing you, wait, I've forgotten what I'm showing you. I'm showing you busco genes phylum. So only the busco genes which were found on these contigs have been blasted and assigned a value.
But this little ball and stick thing works for all of them, not just the busco.
Yes, it works for, if I go back to here and I say reset this and show me that as the categories, but it's also highlighted that one contig that I picked out, because that was
I see. Yeah, that's very cool.
And you can go in and look at it. But yes, thank you. So this is something you can't see on the live BlobToolKit viewer, public website. It's only if you follow the steps in my tutorial, because this one was created today and it's not yet available on the website, if that makes sense. I see a green tick on Aurelian's. Does that mean you got it working to this point?
Yes.
Fabulous. Woohoo! I feel like my job is done. No, we'll keep going. So we know we can make a viewer, and then the next stage in the pipeline, just for fun, is download some more blob directories. So go back in. So you'll have to kill the existing blob tools view command first. So to do that, I go back here. I'll do it on my own. I'll kill it over here. So Control C will kill it. That's fine. And I say, go back into that directory, download 2 more, and run the view command again. So if you copy and paste all of these, you should get now 3 folders. And it'll do that whole initializing viewer 15 seconds, which, as I told you, it's just waiting. It's not actually taking 15 seconds. But it's waiting because things which need ports and things like that always take a bit longer. Oh, this is interesting. Did you notice that this time it says SSH-L8002 and not 8001? And the reason is because, so you'll actually have to run the SSH command again in a separate window, which is painful, because if we had killed it and waited for a while, that port would have been freed up by the operating system. And the next time we run it, it would have said 8001 again. But because I ran it right away, even though it waited 15 seconds, the previous port was not freed up. So it looked for the next available port and it did it this way. So that's why this time I have to run this command. Close that window, run it again, change the username at host to ubuntu@ghubs dev test2. I mean, it'll look the same in my case because I already had 3 things. And we copy that 8002, go back into the browser. And remember last time it said 8001. If I try to refresh this page, it won't, might actually work because of something else, but I'm just going to say 8002 and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Embarrassing. Maybe it's still on 8001. Sorry. Something. I know what has happened. I'm going to kill it and you run it on my local machine because, wait, where am I? I'm actually a bit confused. It's because I have this running as well. Because I tried to do it on 2 different machines. I have 2 different things running and they're conflicting with each other. It's my fault. I will kill that. That's on the server. I will run it only on the local machine. And this time I'm going to wait for a few seconds. This is always a good idea. And hopefully it will work fine. It's because I was running it on the server and on a remote one, and on a local one, and the 2 ports clashed. So run it on only one thing, you'll be fine. That looks like it makes more sense. Nope. I think I've broken it. I killed it, started the command again. It's because this is open. Sorry, I've confused myself. I'm going to close the server. For people that it worked for, I'm very glad it worked for you. I'm going to close everything and start again. Close that. It does work, I promise you.
Yeah. I repeat everything and it worked. I have now the 3 files.
Fabulous. Okay, so it does work. Great. It's just me confusing myself and we only have 15 minutes. So I'm going to go on to the next bit of the tutorial. But this was the hardest part, so that's good. Yeah, I'm hoping this will work this time. Oops, my Hooray. Okay, so it was because I was confusing myself. Good. At least we know. And I just noticed there's something in chat. Oops, connectors look interesting. Will it be added? Yes, it will be added to the public website eventually. Actually, probably, well, the problem is that the way the public website works is that once a blobder has been created, it only has the features that we ran the analyses for. So if the connectors were not done, because the connector requires you to break up the break it up in 10 different pieces and run the GC coverage statistics separately. So for a while, it will be on the public website, but only for the new assemblies, not for the old assemblies. And then eventually we will run it across everything again, and then you will see it for everything. But initially, it'll only be for the new public assemblies, not for the old ones. Okay, so this is all great. I'm going back to the tutorial, which is here. Right. And now, so we've done the first part, which is how do you, if you have a blobder, how do you view it? Now we're going to run blob tools to create a blobder. And this part, unfortunately, you can't run it because the folder that I made was too large to share for downloading. It was about 20 gigabytes. It would have taken too long just to download. So this part of the demo is only on my screen for now, but I will add a smaller example on this page with, so I wasn't able to find a good example where I could take a small genome assembly, make a small BLAST database just with those sequences, make a small UniProt database just with those sequences. And I should have done all that before today, but I wasn't able to in time. I will add that example so that everything will exist in one place and you'll be able to run all the steps as a demo. And if all the steps work as a demo, then you can replace it with the full NT database, the full UniProt database, the full Busco lineage set, and so on and so forth. Is that okay? So for now, I'm running it on my computer because I didn't have time to make smaller data sets. So that's fine. So I will run the commands, go back to this view, close this. We don't want this. Close that, and create a new thing. Okay, so we are, oh, that's probably too big. That's okay. There we go. So I'm going to go to a place where I already have some existing files. So I'll show you what's in there. So this is what a blobder looks like. It has an assembly folder. It has a reads folder. Those are the two things that we begin with. So I can show you what the assembly folder has. It has just the assembly FASTA file. And I can show you what the reads folder has. It has two FASTQ files. We could have had more depending on how many read sets there were for this assembly. So these are the two things you need to begin with. The other thing you need is something called a config.yaml file. This is an instruction that's present in the pipeline. So if you go down to the pipeline, it tells you you need a config.yaml file. This is the link that I have at the top of the tutorial over here. Here. Now run any of the steps in this pipeline. So we're going to come to that. So these three things are all that you need to begin with. Assembly folder, reads folder, and a config.yaml. That's all you need to begin with. And the pipeline will create all the steps that I have shown you till here. Now, as you can see, there are many different steps in the pipeline. There are BLASTn steps. There are BlobToolKit steps for the pipeline as a whole. There are Busco steps. There are Diamond BlastX steps. So this is when you take the Busco genes and you use Diamond to blast against the UniProt protein databases. There's a Diamond Blast P. Minimap is used for mapping the read files to the assembly file to get coverage. Stats is generated by getting things like GC and forgotten what else. I think the coverage also comes from stats and all the things of breaking it up into 10 pieces and doing all that. Window masker is used for masking repeats so that you don't blast repetitive sequences. You only blast non-repetitive sequences. And so all of these steps can be run by running the pipeline. And the way to run the pipeline is to run the pipeline, set some bash environment variable names. So you need a data directory, which is the data directory where your files will be kept, your blobder will be kept. So I'm going to copy and paste that. In this case, the data directory is volumes data by accession. And then each subfolder is for each separate assembly. The snake directory is the directory which has all the snake make pipeline files. And that, if you remember, is what we had downloaded at the start. We had created a BlobToolKit directory and we had taken a clone of the Git repository. So that is over there. That's this step over here. Where is it? Git clone BlobToolKit pipeline. So it's being put in BlobToolKit pipeline. And we are down. Sorry, this is a bit confusing. Threads is just a way of saying, if you have a multi-threaded machine, how many do you want to use? I have 16 threads on this machine, so I'm saying use 16 threads. And the accession is, if you're using an NCBI genome assembly, then you need to do this because it creates, the way I've set it up, it needs to know the accession to create suffixes and things like that. If you're not doing an NCBI assembly, you'll just give the file name over here. So that's fine. And now we can run any of the steps in the pipeline. So remember, I told you that the pipeline has many steps. It has BLAST10, buscode, diamond, minimap, window masker. If I show you on the pipeline page, these are the sub pipelines. So there's a minimap pipeline, it aligns the reads, window masker, what I just told you, stats calculates all the sequence statistics, buscode runs buscode, diamond, so on and so forth. I'm going to run just one command. I don't know which one. Maybe I'll run the buscode one. Oh, I run minimap in my example. I'll stick with minimap. So the way to run the different steps of the pipeline is identical. So you just put a variable called tool equals minimap, and then you just copy and paste this part and it should work. And the nice thing is, because my minimap directory already exists and it already has the results, this pipeline will say, I've checked that folder, everything is done, I don't need to do it again. And that's perfect. So I will run that. Snake make, copy, paste, and you can see
So
what
this is redundant with what we've already done with the full snake pipeline. Okay.
Yeah, with the old V1 pipeline, it's exactly the same steps. The difference is you get slightly different statistics. You get the breaking up into tens and things like that.
Okay, so that's why
enough.
you would do this separately as opposed to what we did a half hour ago.
What did we do half an hour ago?
But when you did that first command, that was a snake make thing that had all of these steps in it together, right?
That was just to set up the environment. That wasn't
okay.
the pipeline. Sorry, my bad.
I just wanted to check
you.
I was following.
That was this command. I know. Do you know what? Maybe I think you're confused because that said snake make and this says Mamba.
No. So what we've already made images, so that those images that we've already created, how is this different?
Where have we created images? I didn't think we had created.
Well,
images.
you already went onto the web page and showed. It's hard to know because I'm following and not doing.
Right.
But everything that we've just looked at in the browser.
Yes, you're right. It is redundant. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, I said this wrong. I'm working backwards.
Okay.
I started
okay,
with your. No, I'm so sorry. I thought I was being very clever by working backwards, but I didn't.
No.
My fault. My fault.
It's just me, just making sure I understand. It's probably just me.
So yes, it's redundant. We've already created a blobder, and there's no reason to run this step again.
Okay.
You're
Okay. Good.
right. I'm only showing you that if you had to run these steps, what you would do. I was
Okay. Good. Yeah. And there's lots of reasons to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And also you might want to rerun one part of it because you've got an extra blast step.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay.
That's an excellent question, and I'm sorry that I wasn't clear about it. Anybody else has a similar question, or before I move on to the next step? Nope.
Yeah, I just popped in the chat that on the Busco bit of the pipeline on the other screen, it looked like the mollusk database wasn't one of the options that you could use as standard.
So
right?
this is, where is this? Sorry.
On the pipeline, on the
Sure.
website tracked through, I think.
Yep. I'll go and check. So is it this busco.smk?
Yeah.
Yep. And so what it does is the snakemake file just says run busco. It's sort of nested snake files all the way down, and it took me a while to figure this out as well. So I'm going to go back to the rules, and in the rules it says run busco 5. And in run busco 5, it actually doesn't say, because it's very general, it doesn't say you need to run it for mollusks. This particular example is not a mollusk example. I can show you what it is. Less config.yaml. So in the config.yaml, it tells you, which assembly are you running it for. And in the busco, it says which buscos are you running it for. So this is a Lepidoptera. That's why it's running the Lepidoptera busco, the Endopterygota busco, Insecta, and all of these. It's basically running all of them. If you don't want to run all of them, you can run less of them if you want to. So the config.yaml file is where you would specify which busco lineages you want to run.
Okay, cool.
And right now, this has to, there are two ways of creating this file. One is you can do it by hand, which is painful. If you create it by hand, in the assembly section, all you need is a file and a prefix, and that's all you need. You don't need anything else. And the busco lineages, you need all of them. And if you have reads, you should specify what the file is and what the platform is and what the prefix is, and that's all you need. I'll specify all this in the tutorial. I didn't make it very clear. This particular file was created automatically for running on NCBI and ENA based data. So it has a lot more rich data about what URL it came from, what the biosample is, what the bioproject is, what the alias is. Those are things you may not have for your own genome assemblies. You would probably just have a file, which is that. You would tell it the location of the file, and you would have a prefix, which can be anything you want. So in this case, it's the prefix that's on NCBI, but you can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it my favorite assembly 1, as long as it's one word. Is that okay? So sorry, I didn't make that very clear. So you need a config YAML file. I'll just say it again. To run the pipeline, you need a config YAML file, you need an assembly directory, and you need a reads directory. And that's essentially it. Everything else will run. And the way you run all the other steps is either you can pick up each step one by one and run it. So you can do it like that, which I just did. And it says Minimap is already done. Or I'm now going to run a step which has not yet run. And the step which has not yet run is the actual BlobTools step. And this is the step that actually takes all the intermediate files from all the other tools and puts them together into one blob directory. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So this is this step, the BlobTools step. So it's going to take all these files, run BlobTools2, and give you a blob directory, which, as Alice pointed out, we already have. So we're just running it again just to see what it looks like. So I'm now going to take tool BlobTools, copy this, paste it. And this time it's doing more things. Because I had actually, what I did was I deleted that directory just so that I could show you what it looks like when you run it again. And actually, this is a good example, because it's actually telling you the exact command it is running underneath, which is BlobTools replace, get all the statistics from the bed directory, get all the meta information from this file, get the NCBI taxonomy. Oops, sorry, it's finished. I'll just show you what this is doing. So this step is basically running the main BlobTools command. And now, instead of you running it, you're asking SnakeMake to run it. And the nice thing with getting SnakeMake to run it is that if I now run this again, it will say already done, nothing needs to be done. So if I copy this and I paste it here, it'll just say building DAG, nothing to be done, it's all done, which is great. And so for those of you who have run BlobTools2 before manually on the command line, you'll probably recognize this command, which is something like BlobTools replace. You might have used BlobTools create or BlobTools add. It's actually the same command. All it's doing is it's saying if a file already exists, then replace it. Otherwise, don't replace it. Don't create a new directory. And it's using a taxonomy rule. It's using busco files from a particular location. It's what else does it have? It has many busco files, and it has all the hits files from Diamond, from Blast 10, and it has an e-value cutoff. It tells you how many maximum hits to get. It has a certain number of threads. And lastly, it tells you which folder to put everything in. So it puts it all in that folder, which I will show you now. So it would have put it. So if I show you ls, that folder is not there. And the reason it's not there is because I told it to run it in the directory, data directory accession tool. which means it will be in a subfolder with the name BlobTools. So if I now go into BlobTools, that's the folder that was just created, ls minus
It's 18
4.
hours.
It was created just now at 4:58. Well, it's off by 1 hour because of the time zone difference on the server. And this folder can now be viewed using BlobToolKit view, BlobTools view. Does that make sense? Awesome. So you can run individual steps like this by putting it in, or you can run the entire pipeline with one step. And I will show you what that step is. I haven't got it on the tutorial. I still need to update the tutorial. That step is, instead of the tool being BlobTools, which is just the step that runs the aggregating step, you can actually say run all of BlobToolKit. And what that will do is it'll run all the steps. So this is just setting the variable. It'll run all of these steps. It'll run, where did it go? Sorry. Going back and forth a bit, which is embarrassing. That's correct. It'll run all of these steps. It'll run minimap, window masker, stats, buscode, diamond, blast10, and it'll run BlobTools, and it'll run the view command, which generates all the static images that are needed. So I will show you how that works. So this time I'm not saying run the view command. I'm just saying run the BlobToolKit command, and it'll run all the steps underneath. So I run the snake-make command, which basically says run BlobToolKit because the tool value is, the variable value is tool. Press enter. It checks. It says I've done all the other steps. The only step that's remaining is view. So I'm going to generate the views now. And it's collected all the files. Let me just see. Sorry, I realize we're at 6 o'clock, but give me 2 minutes more. There we go. So what it's done now is it's actually loaded up a browser internally, which you can't see, and it's rendering the images as SVG and PNG. Do you remember last time we had an interactive and static view for things that had too many contigs? So the static views were being shown based on these pictures that are being generated right now. So the SVG and PNG files are being generated, and those will be available in the BlobDir to be viewed in the BlobToolKit viewer if you want to see a static quick view on your phone or your iPad or something. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say.
There are 2 questions in the chat.
Oh yeah, sorry. Is there a way to automatically filter out the contaminants? There is. I haven't covered that in my tutorial yet. It depends how sure you are of the, if it depends on how sure you are of your way of determining what is a contaminant. So what we say is BlobToolKit is only giving you a way to identify the contaminants, but you have to make the call yourself. So let's say, I'm just going to go back in here, go to the viewer and say, I trust that the two, oh, I stopped running it again. I'm going to go to the public viewer just because I've stopped running it. View. And I just remembered that I have a problem where it doesn't run on my browser unless I run it in incognito mode because of something I did that was silly. So if I run it in incognito mode, it works fine. Yeah. Okay. So if I go to Metazoa and I go to Mollusca and I pick up, what was the bad assembly we had last time? I've forgotten.
Conus.
Say that again.
I think it was Conus. Maybe I can't remember. CONUS.
Consors. Yep, that's the one. Oh God, but that was also the one that takes a very long time to load.
Oh yeah, it's in several million pieces.
Okay, sorry. So to come back to your question, I think the better thing to do is to show you that there are actually tutorial steps for automatic filtering, and they are, so the problem is that some of these tutorials over here are out of date because they were run for the previous version of the pipeline and tools, but some of them are still useful. I will be updating all of them. I haven't had time. I apologize. I've done this one tutorial, but if you go to BlobTools 2, there is a BlobTools filter command, and it says data sets can be filtered based on the values in any variable or category field. And what you're doing interactively on the command line, on the viewer, you can also do on the command line and generate lists of files, which you can then say, I only want these contigs, I don't want these contigs. Does that make sense?
I think I've done this also with just some of the output files, just based on their coordinates.
Yeah.
I then
you can
got
do
the
that. You
contig
can say
names and then
PCN
went,
coverage is too high,
Yeah.
too low, and you can do that. Yes.
and then I took out all of those just using blast db command or something, and then did filtering, double checking with them further, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So the problem is you still have to do a lot of manual work, but that's just the nature
Yeah.
of the game, I think. Nicola's question is, if I ran BlobTools on my genome with V1, should I be repeating it with V2? I think so. But if it takes too long, because the blasts take too long, don't bother. I mean, it's up to you. I think you should, because you'll get some new features which are quite nice, but you don't have to. I mean, the old one does work. It still gives you, but we have new tax rules and they're not all documented, unfortunately, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you stick them on an email or stick them in GitHub issues. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so it finished running it, which means now we should have a new folder called view. Oops, in the wrong folder. Go up one level. We've just created this view folder, which has just been created, and I can show you what's inside it. It's got this folder, but now it also, notice it also has these PNG files, and it should have some SVG files somewhere. No, it doesn't. Oh, the PNG files are created from the SVG files. That's fine. So these are the static images which are loaded on the website when you say you want a static version of the website viewer and not the interactive version. So the view command is also run. The point I was trying to make was that if you run it with tool equals BlobToolKit, it'll run all the steps in this pipeline, all the sub pipelines, including the view command, including the BlobTools, including so on and so forth. I will modify the tutorial so that it has an example of how to create everything. If you go back to the tutorial that is linked to from my tutorial, sorry, I said that wrong. If you go back to the pipeline command and go down, it'll actually tell you how to download all the databases. So how to get NCBI tax dump, how to get UniProt, how to get NCBI NT, how to get other things. Busco, I have to put in the commands for Busco. And I will make sure that all of this is updated and added on to my tutorial, which is specific to how to do things for a small scale example. It doesn't exist yet. It will be soon. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I had another question regarding the news pipeline.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to test it out, but the first version of the pipeline always attempted to pull the databases and format them, meaning the pipeline required internet access. And if you're running this on a cluster, it always choked and broke because clusters generally, the compute nodes generally don't have internet access.
Yep.
That was one of the things I struggled with the most, fighting with the pipeline, and eventually abandoned it because
Yep. I understand.
Is version 2 able to be run offline
Yes.
more easily?
Yes. So the way you would do it is you would on this. So this is my tutorial, and from my tutorial, you can see that it links to these sections are identical to the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
So if I click on pipeline, you can see that it takes you to first the dependencies, and then it takes you to databases. So if you run these commands on a node or a front-end node that is not a compute node, so you run it from your login node, you should be fine, because it'll create the tax dump, it'll download the UniProt databases. This takes a while, by the way. The thing that takes longest is the NT databases. It's about, I think it's about 40 gigabytes now. I don't know how much it is, but you can choose to skip that step if you want to. You can just do it with UniProt and Diamond and Busco genes, and it won't run the NT step. So you're okay with that. And Busco can similarly be downloaded offline and used offline, which I will add to this thing today, if possible. So basically, on the front end node, you run all these commands.
Yep.
And then in your compute node, you change the config file to point to these folders and it'll get everything from there. It won't try to get it from the internet.
Okay, that's what I'd done. I had done all this previously for the version 1 pipeline, and yet when I run the pipeline and tell it where all these formatted databases are, it still was throwing errors about trying to access
I
the
got
internet.
one error like that even with version 2,
Okay.
what you're talking about, and that was for Busco specifically. And what I discovered was that, and this is me doing all the testing for Rich. Rich does all the development. I do sort of the testing and outreach part. That's how we're breaking up our roles right now. And it turns out that there was one folder which was not being checked correctly. So even though the folder existed, Busco thought it doesn't exist, and it was going off to the internet and trying to download it again. And that's why it was probably breaking for you in V1 as well. And it was breaking for me in V2 as well. I fixed that now. So the latest version, at least I fixed it last week. So this version of the pipeline should not have that problem.
Okay.
But if possible, I'm also happy to go back. If you don't want to do everything again, I'm happy to go work with you on V1 and see if there's a place where we can change the one thing so that it, goes to the right place and finds it, and you don't have to, if that makes sense. But your query is legitimate and, should have been addressed earlier. Sorry for that.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Okay.
And then along these lines, with your tutorial, would you mind providing also an example, like offline config YAML file?
Yeah, so one where you're creating one entirely yourself.
Yeah, an example of that would be
an excellent idea.
Great as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. What I was going to do was, I should have done that for today, but it's just been a very stressful week, as you can imagine. With this situation in India, it's just awful. It's just, so nobody I know is currently hurting really bad, but I've had relatives get COVID. It's just been very stressful. Sorry. But no, I will absolutely do that. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. So in the tutorial, there will be a minimal config.yaml file, and there will be a minimal BLAST database and a minimal Busco lineage, and everything that you download should work. And then it's a question of you expanding it. So you get the full BLAST database, you get the full Busco lineage, you get the full everything, and then everything should work. That's the idea. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, what is the basis for setting up e-value cutoff? You can change it to whatever you want. That's a great question. I think, it's arbitrary. We pick numbers like 10 and 25 just because they look good. It's completely arbitrary. So, Lijing, that's the short answer. You can pick if you think a better value works. I remember people used to use 1e minus 25 back in the day because that was sort of such a high value relatively that if it hit it at that value, it was almost certainly that species or organism. But a lot of the time we want a rough hit as well. So we might use a lower value like, 1e minus 5 seems very popular. I think it's all arbitrary. You can change it to whatever makes sense to you. One nice thing in the config.yaml file, I will just show you very quickly, is where it says BLAST, it says defaults. Here we go. E-value 1e minus 10, import e-value 1e minus 25. The nice thing with this is if you set e-value to 1e minus 10 and run the pipeline the first time, it'll run all the steps with 1e minus 10. Later on, when you're creating your BlobTools views, you can change the import e-value to something more strict, and it'll only put the values that meet that criteria. So you don't have to run the BLAST steps again. You only have to run the import step, which is very, very quick, the BlobTools step. So that's one nice thing. Again, this is not documented behavior, or maybe it is, I don't know. I haven't seen the old documentation fully. Great. Any other questions? It's 6:14. I should probably hang up.
Thank you so much for your time.
Cool.
This is very useful. Can you maybe in the next day or two post just the links to the most important things in Slack, or send them to me and I can, either way?
I will happily.